Now, if you're new here, first of all, welcome. Number two, I was years ago, I think maybe even Brian, when you guys were here, it was about 10, 12 years ago. I came in, and during our second service, we used to meet upstairs, and we've been downstairs only here a few years. So to be able to come downstairs, get a drink, take care of the kids, say hi to everybody, between services, I had to go back upstairs. And so I was following a guy going upstairs here, and two guys, two brothers, and they started to go upstairs, and the one brother turned to one of the guys and said, so what's the pastor preaching on today? And he goes, oh, he's continuing with the series in Abraham. And the other guy said, oh, is he still on that? And I was like, yes, I am. And he turned around, oh, okay, yeah, great. I look forward to hearing it. And I was like, it was a total cop-out, you know. It's like he didn't know that I was standing right behind him. So today, I'm just going to, you don't even have to say it. If you feel that way, like, oh, is he still on Daniel? Don't worry, it's just a few more messages because we're at the hardest part of the book. And maybe you're coming and you're visiting with us for the first time. And it's like, where is he? Everything's recorded. You can go back online. You can follow us there, okay? Today, though, I'm going to speak to you about the culture of anger, okay? We're going to see that highlighted here in the second part of the prophecy of Daniel. Daniel's prophecy really goes 2 full chapters. It's 300 lines. It's extremely detailed with the history that takes place. It's fantastic to follow. And in the middle, we're looking at our second king. In the middle, there's this prophecy part about a king that becomes furious. And we're going to talk about that and in the culture. Let me give you an idea. I know that there's personal anger that we have, and maybe you're struggling with anger issues yourself about bringing them under the gospel and in Christ. But what I want to do is talk more about the influence of our culture. Like we have a rage culture that is happening in our world. And it happens in multiple nations over opinions, and you can be from any background and still experience this. And a rage culture and anger culture comes usually from the sense that somebody is stealing something from me, taking something from me, right? We have that often when we feel like, especially when we live for the here and the now. Like I'm accumulating and holding on to all that I can. I got to get the most out of life, and I have to live for here and now. And it feels like someone or something is stealing from me, either like my lifestyle or my freedom or my security, my identity, my memories, my money, my country, my vote, my comfort, my rights, and any of those things. When that feeling grows in a society, then it resorts to kind of a forced peace through violence. Like we're going to keep the rule of law because everybody's angry and resorting to violence, but we're going to crush that so that we can have peace. And many times, a powerful leader and a dynamic leader will come and rise up in a country and even embody that spirit of populist anger and lashing out and even resorting to violence. And it happens all over through the history. And Daniel will show us that this is very cyclical of nations to do, to grow and to become furious and to take and protect. I'll give you an illustration of how it's in our culture today. This last week, I was at a condo meeting. We live in an apartment with 25 other apartments around us. And so we had our condominium meeting and gathered. And these are always something to look forward to in life. And so we got there, and they were seated. We were all seated on benches. And there was a table at the front. And there was the administrator of our condominium seated at the table by himself. And we began the condominium meeting, everybody seated and quiet and in order. 2 hours later, nobody was seated, and everybody was standing up around the table, behind the table, yelling at the administrator and him yelling back at them. Now, God has blessed that man here. He lives in Azzano Decimo area. And God has blessed that man with a voice that is about as loud as 30 voices put together. So he could handle it. He was holding his own. But everybody was yelling simultaneously. And everybody was angry. And everybody had different opinions. And so I realized why the table was there. It wasn't there so he could rest his things. It was there to be like a shield. So if he had to turn it and lift it up to hold off the people, the angry people, he could do that. And so there he was, holding his own, everybody fighting. I mean, I encouraged one of my neighbors, just for a smile, I said, if this is a time that you have any complaints about your childhood or any angers about your work or your boss, go up there and just let it out, let it fly. Nobody's going to listen to you, and nobody's going to know what you've said, but it's a yell-free zone because everybody's doing it, right? Except for me and Sandy after I pulled her out of the group. And then we stood back and we watched this fight, this argument unfold. Now, here's a cultural difference. I've lived here in Italy for 26 years now, more or less, and I have seen arguments like this where everybody seems to comprehend each other and yell all at the same time and get in each other's faces, turn red, and they get really close, but they won't touch each other. And that's what was happening. Everybody was getting closer, but they get so close they won't touch each other, right? And if that was in the States, I'm just saying, it's not like you're shaking hands with somebody. It's, you're punching their lights out. For these kind of arguments, I just marvel at how do they have enough restraint? And I think it's because of all the paperwork that will follow from if they hit each other. They would rather not go through the pain of the paperwork to follow. Okay. So another thing that's culturally interesting is this. After all that arguing and all that fighting, it was hilarious. We watched some different people. They would all of a sudden stop. They were red-faced, and calm down. And then they look, and then they would turn their head and smile and say, "It was so good to see you. Thank you for coming out to be at our meeting tonight." And I was like, how do you do that? Because I come from a culture where you're stomping away as part of your demonstration of your anger, right? And it's this rage culture over opinions. And then the one lady, she grabbed her keys and she threw it down. And she grabbed her phone, she threw it down. She grabbed her purse, she threw it down. And while she was speaking over everybody, spinning around, throwing these things down, and then it was cuss word after cuss word after cuss word after cuss word, and she went all around this cussing all around. I was like, wow, this is incredible. Because I was studying this passage. And I said, it's like unfolding right before me. And I marveled, I just said, what is it in our cultures that right underneath the surface, over any small opinions, what makes this dynamic that actually causes us in a culture to go volcanic, to become so angry and triggered so quickly? And it is a rage or an anger culture that's built underneath. Now, last time that I spoke, I talked to you and spoke to you about culture is the accumulation or the accumulation or the gathering, the sum total, let's put it that way, the sum total of all the actions that a society does. That's what a culture is. It's the actions or the way of thinking of what a society does. And where does a culture begin? It begins in your home. So we're part of our culture, and these influences are really strong. We talked about the culture of success last time and the idol that's there. We're talking today about this culture of anger, of I have to take something I think is mine. I have to take it back, I have to protect it, or not let it be taken from me. And my opinion has to be louder than anybody else's opinion. And the person who talks louder and yells louder is the bigger influencer and has more people to follow. And that's in our culture. That is the anger culture. We're going to see this sense of that anger happening in this passage and what takes place embodied in this king that we're looking at. And we're going to see how the king is filled with anger, how he unleashes his anger even on God's people. And we're also going to see how God responded to that anger, what he did to actually turn it to his advantage. And then also we're going to see how he responds to anger today and what he wants from us as believers as we experience anger in our own cultures, so that we're not eaten by this lion of rage culture. So let's get context. I'm going to go back and review just a little bit, or otherwise you'll be lost in this prophecy. We are in Daniel 11, so if you guys could make sure that you've turned there or you've opened your apps to that, that would be great. Thank you. I have it right here. There we go. This comes from the prophecy where it began in Daniel chapter 7. Daniel 11 expands on what Daniel saw in chapter 7 earlier in his life. In this prophecy, we are looking today at the last king or the last head on the four-headed leopard with wings. Okay, that beast. And next week, it moves from this over to this kingdom of Rome. So you're looking at Greece and its closure, if you will, its destruction, over to Rome, and along with the Jews. We'll talk about the little horn and Chief Little Horn again. We brought him up before, and that will help us explain what these beasts are and these empires are. Okay? So just so that you know, just to give you a picture and a design in your mind. Let me review very quickly, okay, 3 reasons why this prophecy is important. I shared them before, but I want to remind you of them. Number 1 is because every prophecy that Daniel does, and by the way, every phrase has a whole story of history. A phrase is like a title of the history that happens. But Daniel's prophesying this is going to happen in the future, but it has to come true before the time of Christ, or he becomes a false prophet. And therefore, he listened to a false angel, and the book of Daniel is not valid. So that's why it's important to study it and at least learn about it. So thank you for your patience and digging in and following me in what can be a tricky story and sometimes confusing. Number 2, Daniel is writing this as a guide for his people so they will stay faithful. They will stay faithful until the time of Jesus. And then Jesus would become the greater Daniel. And then if we turn to Christ and Christ is in us, then we become the people of the greater Daniel. So Daniel is writing this book to help us be faithful as well. They had to look to the future, okay, when he wrote this prophecy, and trust the Lord. We have to look back to the past at the same prophecy and still trust the Lord that he's in control, that he's sovereign, and that he's moving the times, epochs, and people, nations, okay? Number 3, Daniel is helping us to see the grace that is behind the scenes, okay? You're not going to see a lot about God mentioned in this passage that we're talking about, but we do see him moving. We do see him working, and we do see him fighting to cleanse Israel and fighting on behalf of preserving Israel as well, so that the Messiah can come in the next passage that we're going to look at, okay? So this message, 2 more, and I think we'll cover the book of Daniel. Are you ready? Okay, you got your buckles on, seatbelt up? Back to the map, okay? So remember, we have these 2 great nations that are fighting. Right in the middle is Israel, and this is the center of the prophecies through this whole era from Daniel's day all the way to the time of Jesus' day and the destruction of the temple. So up top we have the Seleucids, or in this case, the Say Look Kids. That's how you can remember this big nation. Say Look Kids, how big that country is, the yellow. Down here we have the other nation, the Ptolemies, and reminds me, and it's Egypt, and it's hot, and it sounds like tamales. So you have the tamales down there. Okay, do you like that? Does that work? How do you think I remember your names, guys? Seriously. So this continues. We left off last time with Antiochus the Great. Okay? Antiochus the Great was favorable to the Jews. He allowed them to worship. He helped them to do that. And then there was rivalry in the Jews and corruption. They started to practice apostasy. What's apostasy? Apostasy is knowing the truth and how to worship God correctly, what God desires, and then maybe dismantling that, maybe denigrating that, turning to something else and adding an idol in. So it's corrupting the worship of God and adding in an idolatrous practice or an idol itself. And that's what was happening among the priests and the high priests and the leaders of Israel under Antiochus the Great. That's Antiochus III. Remember last time we said A3? Some of you, were you here? Okay, you do remember that. So we're going to just say A3 because, again, all these are in order. And by the way, in the Tamale region, the Ptolemies down in Egypt, we are at Seleucid 6, okay? S6 is on the scene down there. So far, so good? This is to help us keep order of what's happening. I have to give you this history because that's what our passage, we're looking at a group of verses, and we'll touch a few of them in a minute. But I have to give you the history, or when you read it, you'll say, who is he talking about? Because of the way that the Hebrew is formed, okay? So I've done my history study, and I want to share it with you, okay? So A3, Antiochus III, he dies, and he has a son, and his son is S4, Seleucid 4. Ptolemy P6 is down here. Sorry, I said in Tamale region. Ptolemy 6. P6 is down there ruling in Egypt. S4 is not as great of a leader as Antiochus. The Jews have already been turning their backs, the leadership, toward God's ruler of Antiochus. They weren't praying for him. They weren't following him. And they were trying to make agreements with Egypt. They were going back to Egypt, and God didn't want that. And Daniel's prophesying that that would take place. So what happens? He has two sons. S4 is Seleucid 4, and he takes the throne. Seleucid 4 has a brother, which is Antiochus. Number 4. Good job, Chris. All right, so we're just adding. So we have now A3 dies, and he has A4. Okay, are you following, everybody? Are we with me? Okay. So A4, now what he does is, he's actually a prisoner in Rome to guarantee tribute. Because Rome is rising, and it's a strong empire now, and it's growing. And Rome, to be able to make an ally and keep an ally with the Seleucid Empire, Rome over there, they're exacting tribute. And the way to be able to do that, to guarantee that they would have an alliance, is they took one of the king's sons as hostage and prisoner. Fair enough. You won't attack us if your son and the other right to the throne is there, right? So Seleucid 4, he takes the throne because Antiochus III dies. Seleucid 4 knows that his brother, Antiochus IV, he knows that he is better at building armies and attacking and conquesting and raising more money. Because when you conquest, you get rich. And you take the booty and you take all the gold and all the things that you can have, and then you can support more war. You can support more troops. That's what he does. And so S4, he wants his brother to come and help him to build a greater army, because the tamales down there, well, they're getting stronger and stronger. Okay? So here's what he does. He says, I have a son named Demetrius. He was the next heir to the throne. Demetrius, why don't you, so he trades with the Romans. He says, you take Demetrius, my son, and I'll take back my brother, A4. Fair, nice trade. Thanks, Dad, right? Happy Father's Day, right? So Demetrius has to go to prison. A4 has been in prison, humiliated before the Romans, really. And he's on his way back, and he's in Athens, and all of a sudden, Seleucid IV, his brother, dies. And now there's a race to the throne, okay? So he's traveling back through Greece in the green area. Now he's got to go through, and he gets the king of Pergamum right there in the gold area, and they come together to kind of be his guarantor. And he says, I will work with his assistant, and I'll be a co-regent with him to be able to preserve the throne for Demetrius. That's what he used with smooth words. I'll preserve the throne. And then Demetrius, when we can get him back and trade him for somebody else, he can come back and he can sit on the throne here. Yeah, right. So A4, he gets the throne. Nobody gets killed. He takes it as a co-regent. And then he basically kicks out the other assistant, the placeholder king that was there, and he takes the throne and starts to build the army fast. And he's aggressive. And then he names himself Antiochus Epiphanes. Have you ever heard of Antiochus Epiphanes in history? Let me introduce him to you if you haven't or you can't remember way back when you went to school in history class. Antiochus Epiphanes means God manifest. God made manifest. I am here, basically, is what he's saying. I am God, and I am here. And so he declares himself much bigger than what he is. He takes on this huge title, and he is intelligent. And Daniel talks about that in the first 7 verses. He's extremely strategic. He grows his armies fast. He attacks with small groups, and he uses smooth words, and he distributes the wealth. So when he takes the wealth, he starts to distribute it because he's buying, if you will, more influence across the empire. Well, P6 is down here, and he sees that A4, well, he has to give tribute back to Rome, so he's weak. He can't support a military. They don't have the kind of money. This is the time for us to attack, and we can take over all of Israel. Do you see the red and the gold or the yellow there? The battleground was all of Israel. So he marches on Palestine, and he's going to take that. And Antiochus comes to the moment, and he brings down this huge army. P6, Ptolemy VI, he has an even bigger army, but he loses because Antiochus is a greater and stronger leader. And thousands of soldiers die on the battlefields there in Israel. And so from there, Ptolemy VI starts to draw back and retreat, and Antiochus goes into Jerusalem, okay, gets some more wealth, exacts some more tribute so he can fund the war. And he says, I'm going to continue the campaign, and I'm going to go after the tamales, hot tamales down there in Egypt. Okay, I'm going to go after them, and I'm going to finish this. And he has to go to try to reach Alexandria. You see Alexandria there on our map. Okay, so Alexandria would be here. The problem is that he cannot conquer it because he's only been at this for a year. Okay, he's driving down, he's trying to conquer it, and he wants Egypt for himself to expand everything and make it yellow. That's the first part of the story. There's a side story that's developing that's important for us to know, especially for next week's message and after. What's going on in Jerusalem? Because that's where we left off last time. In Jerusalem, there is a high priest. Now, the high priest was also the head of the religious order and the temple. He was also the king and the government. So he's kind of one guy ruling everything as the high priest. Now this one, his name was Antiochus III. And Antiochus III was, he was a legitimate high priest. And he was in the right line in the Aaronic priesthood, and he was elected properly, and he was placed there. And so there was nothing wrong with him being the high priest until his brother came along. It's always the brothers, guys. It's always the brothers. His brother's name was Joshua, but Joshua didn't want to be Jewish anymore. He really wanted to be Greek. So Joshua changed his name to Jason. Now Jason, he had an idea of how he could convert all of Judea into a Greek state. So he went, before Antiochus came down, Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus IV, before he came down to do this campaign into Egypt, Jason goes to him and says, if you will remove my brother from being the governor, being the high priest, and give it to me, then I will pay you more tribute, and I will make Judea a Greek city-state. And Antiochus, he doesn't really like the Jews, but he doesn't have really much against them, and he says, this is a great political move. Now I can have a guy who's thinking like me, he can be my puppet, and I can push him around, and I'm getting more money for it because I need to fuel my campaigns and my armies because I'm paying so much tribute to Rome. Oh, okay. So he has Onias, his brother, moved. Jason goes in place, and Jason is there for 3 years. And Jason turns Jerusalem into a Greek kind of Greek Olympic Games Center. He opens up gymnasiums, and he opens up discus ranges, and he opens up marathons, and a lot of strange things are taking place, but he's Greeking all of Jerusalem and Judea, if I can say it that way, okay? Well, he has a right-hand man. He has his assistant, and his assistant is called Menelaus. Menelaus is charged by Jason to take the tribute and all the gold and the money and to take it up to Antiochus IV, A4, up there in Syria, and to pay him for the tribute for the taxes to be able to have Jerusalem and to be self-governing. So he does. Menelaus arrives, but he uses this as an opportunity. And he tells Antiochus, I have all this gold, but I'm telling you, I can almost double it and give you more if you make me the high priest and the king over Judea. So he betrays his boss, right? And so Antiochus is like, an even better political deal. Now I'm getting even more gold. I'm getting even more tribute. So he makes Menelaus the high priest. And Menelaus, the problem is, right there is where the Jews start to desecrate God's order, God's law, and God's temple. Here's why. Number one, Menelaus was not in the proper order of the high priests of Israel. He couldn't be. He was disqualified at birth already. Number two, Menelaus was a thief and a robber. Menelaus was a liar, and Menelaus started to call himself king more than he did priest. Now Jason, watch this, Jason got the people and the priest to stop, this is in the book of Daniel here where we're reading, he got the high priest and the priest to stop offering the daily sacrifices. They became much more involved in setting up the Greek games. And he did it through the popularity. And the book of Maccabees is a historical book in the Apocrypha. You can read about this. And it said that they had stopped the proper worship of God under Jason, and it got worse under Menelaus, so that they could run the games and get more prestige from other Greek authorities. They wanted awards and prizes and applause. They weren't interested in the worship of God. And that's the high priests. That's the priests of the temple. How do you think God feels about that? You see what's happening? Smooth speech, then promises of fun and recreation, as long as we allow that our worship goes to the sidelines. That is the basis and the groundwork for building a culture of rage and anger. It's when we prioritize, and this is going to hurt, when we prioritize fun over the top of correct, pure, and true worship of God. Recreation and beyond. And we begin right there. We begin right there to start to, if you will, desecrate true worship and maybe even build idols into our world, into our lives. And Menelaus does that. Menelaus comes in and he almost abolishes the worship of God in the temple. And instead, you see, the temple was the bank of Israel. And he went into the temple and secretly he stole large golden vessels and instruments in the temple. And he sent them to Antiochus to bribe him, really. He sent those things to him. Remember the brother of Jason, Onias, the real high priest? He heard about it. It became public. A leak got out, right? And Onias called out and said, this is wrong. This is wrong before God. You shouldn't be in that position. You shouldn't ever, ever have stolen from God's temple and sent that up to a foreign and heathen king. The moment that Menelaus hears that, he sends out his guards and kills Onias. So he already just killed the high priest. So not only did they sacrifice the worship of God, and then they believed and they gave away, if you will, the treasures of God. Now they're killing the servants of God. Do you see all this? This is how this is desecrating, if you will, the worship before God. What is God going to do? He's going to correct this. He always corrects that. Why? Because he loves his people. And what he's going to do is he's going to correct it through Antiochus IV. Here's how. Now that's what's happening in Jerusalem, right? Antiochus goes down and he starts to go after Alexandria. And there's this little rumor that comes up from Egypt that Jason hears that Antiochus has been killed in battle and he's dead. Now Jason thinks, okay, their forces aren't going to have a king. I am going to now take Jerusalem back. Because remember, Antiochus put Menelaus, my assistant, he put him in charge. I'm going to take it back because I'm of the right line. So Jason mounts an attack on Jerusalem. Tons of Jews are killed. They're fighting between themselves. Jason goes and tries to take over a temple, and he fails. How does he fail? Because another message went down during this revolt of Jason and went down to Antiochus, and he hears, and the message was garbled. It wasn't very clear. And Antiochus thinks that all of Judea, all of Israel is in revolt against him. All it was the revolt of Jason in Jerusalem. So Antiochus pulls all of his forces from Egypt, turns around, marches them. Kind of sounds like yesterday in Russia, doesn't it? He pulls all his forces, turns them around, marches them right back to Jerusalem. Now he's distracted to be able to confront this revolt. When he gets there, he does. And he starts killing Jews by the thousands. And he's going to enforce his will. Now he's had it with the Jews. And he starts killing leadership on this occasion. And Jason sees, he's still alive, which means death for Jason, okay? So Menelaus is established, and Menelaus says, come on in. And he welcomes him directly into the temple, and he gives him more tribute, more things out of the temple. And then Antiochus sorts that all out and goes back a year later, after he sorts this whole thing in Jerusalem, back to take over Egypt. That's the prize. We got to have Egypt. Okay, here's the story in Egypt. Please bear with me. We're getting to the end, okay? Are you guys okay? You guys still with me? I'm hoping that I'm making it interesting enough that you can follow, that it's not just a history lesson. This is the Word of God. So this really happened, and I want us to see something great about God here in just a minute. Down in Egypt, when Antiochus goes back to deal with Israel and Jason's rebellion, down in Egypt, he has to put somebody in charge. Who does he put in charge? He puts in charge P6, Ptolemy VI. Why? Because earlier in that battle that he conquered, Ptolemy VII, this is P6's brothers. Now we have P7, the brother. It's always the brothers, I'm telling you. And so P7, what does he do? He betrays Ptolemy VI. And he gets him captured. In other words, he gets P6 captured by Antiochus IV. All right? So, and through this betrayal, P7 now takes the throne. So now you have Antiochus who wants Egypt, and now you have P6, the king, who wants Egypt. And they were together, and in Daniel it says that they would sit at a table to make a pact, because they both wanted the same thing, that they would have an agreement, a strategy together, where they would go down to Egypt and they would take it over, all right? And P6 would be the co-regent with Antiochus. And Daniel said, he prophesied that they were going to betray each other regardless. They both wanted this, and they had to use each other to get it. And that's what's happening. So their plan was go down there and install him as a co-regent and Antiochus to kill P6 and then take it over. So they make this agreement. But remember, there's Jason's riot, and so Antiochus has to go back. So he takes P6, and he says, you're going to be my vassal right now. You're my prisoner. So he puts him in charge while he goes back to Israel. Big distraction for him. So he has to leave and go back. Now, what happens? He's out for like 8 months to a year trying to sort this Israel thing. Now he gets his armies back and he comes back. In the meantime, the P6 and P7 have a sister, and her name is Cleopatra. And Cleopatra gets the brothers and brings them back together secretly. And then together they agree that they're going to hold on to Egypt. And the only way they can do that is because Cleopatra knows some people in Rome. And so they make an agreement behind the scenes in Rome. And the Romans would then defend from Antiochus, who they knew was returning. And sure enough, Antiochus gets his army, starts to go back. And in Daniel, you will see that there are boats from the west that come and stop him. And who is leading that army? The same guy, the same captain who had Antiochus as prisoner when he was back in Rome before he ever became a king. And he humiliated him. And he said, you're going to tell me right here and right now, because Antiochus comes, all of a sudden all these Romans show up. And Antiochus knows you don't mess with the Romans. You don't mess with Italians. You just know that. I want you all to know that too. And so he says, you're going to tell me whether we're going to go to war or whether you're going to have peace and turn around and go back home. You're going to tell me right now. And he goes, let me confer with my generals. And he says, no. And the guard draws a circle in the dust around, in the dirt around Antiochus, a big circle. And he says, by the time you leave this circle, I'm going to have a yes or no, or you die. And so he humiliated him. He said, no, we won't fight. Turned around, went back to what? Jerusalem and Judea. Why? Because they distracted him. He could have had the prize. He could have had Tamale land. Right? He could have had all of Egypt. This is his desire. It's at that moment that he realizes that he's been taken out of the battlefield, he's been betrayed repeatedly, and he starts to lose and he's humiliated, that it says he becomes enraged. And then he fuels that rage because he didn't get what he wanted down to his troops and to his nation and to his culture, and he goes back to Jerusalem, and that's when he starts killing thousands. And the Jews have many stories, horrible, horrible stories of the work of Antiochus Epiphanes, who came in and destroyed them and their people during this rebellion. Now, it's debated whether it was really because he hated them or because they provoked him because they kept betraying him even in Judea. It's kind of both. But God was using that to expose that Antiochus was full of rage and to expose the idolatry and the wickedness of the Jews in their apostasy. And this was leading to a culture that would not bring any... The job of the Israelites from God was to be a light to the nations and to bless others in the nations. They weren't a light at all. They were just as corrupt as everybody else, except for one group. One group that was like the remnant, like the special group that said, we will still be faithful to the Lord. And in those groups, you have these early groups called the Sadducees and the Pharisees that are born right in that same year. And from there, this faithful group would stumble because they believed the smooth words, and then when they saw the fury and the wickedness and the violence, then they would start to come back and return purely to the Lord to allow for the time and be faithful until the time of Christ, until the time of Messiah. That's our story. That's what these 15 verses tell all about. Are you still with me at the end of the story? Okay. Let me show you just a few verses and show you where. We won't read all of them, but you can see this. There shall arise in his place. This is Antiochus III and Seleucid IV. One who shall send an exactor of tribute for the glory of the kingdom. In a few days he'll be broken. This is Seleucid. Neither in anger nor in battle. In his place then will arise a contemptible person. Here is Antiochus IV, to whom royal majesty has never been given. Remember, he took it for himself. He shall come in without warning and obtain the kingdom by smooth speech, flatteries, and distributing the wealth, promising a lot of different things. Armies will be swept away. And it goes on and on talking about how strategic he was. An alliance will become strong, even with small people. It talks about the Egypt part that I was telling you about. And many will fall down slain. That's verse 26 and 27. It talks about the betrayal of those two kings, the P6 and P7, the two brothers. And let's see if I can find this. He'll return to his land with great wealth. Take a look at verse 28. He will return to his land with great wealth, but his heart shall be set against the holy covenant. How do you set your heart against the holy covenant? Why would you set you set it against the people that are in the holy covenant? This is how you set it against God. Now he's angry. He's up against God, and he's up against God's people. At the time he shall be appointed, and he'll return and come into the south, but it shall not be this time as it was before. When he comes back to Egypt, he's not going to be able to take over Egypt like he could before. Why? Because verse 30, ships of Kittim, this is the Roman area, shall come against him, and he shall be afraid and withdraw. In other words, he'll lose his spirit. I mean, he becomes ice cold, scared. And he will withdraw. This is Antiochus. He's going back, turning back. And he will turn back and be what? What's the word there? Enraged, furious. And the fury will take action against the holy covenant. That means God, his temple, and his people. He will turn back and pay attention only to those who betrayed the holy covenant, only to those who are false priests and false leaders that are there. That's what Daniel... Remember, Daniel's prophesying about this 400 years before it takes place. By detail. So, by the time we get to Messiah, how can you miss him if you follow Daniel's work? Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple. Some say that he sacrificed a pig in the temple. Some say that he set up other wicked men and he made it a fortress instead of a place of worship. He'll take away the regular burnt offering, and they shall set up an abomination that makes desolate. The they there are not Antiochus. The they there are the false priests. They're the ones, only priests can desecrate the temple. Antiochus is a pagan ruler. He can only rob the temple. These guys can desecrate it because you can only desecrate something if you know the truth about it and you choose to defame it and reject it and go away. It was the people who were supposed to be faithful to God who actually desecrated the worship of God. Right there in that verse. And that becomes the first abomination that makes desolate. It will conclude in the killing of Jesus Christ, the abomination of desolation. This is the first start of it. The Jews have to turn against God, his covenant, and his Messiah. And this is where they begin to do that. So they will violate the covenant, and people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. If we jump down to verse 34, when they stumble, they shall receive a little help. This was the war of the Maccabees. This was a time where they had some help to purge Israel, and many shall join themselves to them with flattery, and some of the wise shall stumble, that they may be refined, that God will purify them until the time of the end, for it waits to that set time. 2 or 3 places, he says there's a set time for this. Okay, so there's the completion of our story. There's good news here. The first part of the good news is found right there at the end. For it still awaits the appointed time. In other words, all the Antiochuses that we have, all this rage culture and all the cultures that go from words of violence to actions of violence, they all falter. They all have an end because God says Antiochus never gets the last word. Rage and blasphemy never get the last word. So if you fear how your culture is going and becoming more and more enraged and decaying and everybody's fighting, et cetera, and more divided and polarized, listen, that might be for a time. But it's not for you to participate in. It's for you to pray over. It is not for you to get enraged, because God has a set time in every nation's cycle. Why? Because God runs his kingdom. And our countries are not the same as God's kingdom. We live in and through God's kingdom in our countries. Do you see what I'm saying? We are in the world, but we are not of the world. This is not where we get our commanding orders from. So we learn about this and we see how furious, ferocious, there's horrible, wicked things that Antiochus did. And it just, you just saw a culture move from anger, fury into total violence. And it seems like there's a lot of places on earth, even today, that this is happening and experiencing as nations go through phases. I want to talk to you then about anger danger, okay? And ask you, when you experience anger or you approach your culture and these things are coming with you, I have 5 questions for you, and then we'll close with the gospel and the Lord's Supper. The first one is, if you're experiencing anger, have you become angry through smooth speech? Was mentioned 2 or 3 times in our passage. Or smooth speech would be populist language, right? What is populist language? Populist language is like, let's say that you're preparing lunch for your kids, and then you turn on the TV or the radio. Everything's good. Kids are generally happy. People are getting hungry, but everything's good. And then something comes up, and there's some issue that happens over on the other side of the world or in another state from where you live, etc. And what they start reporting, it just makes you mad. And then you start hearing all these other people talking how angry they're becoming. And then by the time you made lunch, you were happy starting, and now you're just ferocious. And now you're just angry. It's like, we're going to fight too, you see. Populist language is people who yell and tap into this rage that's right underneath the surface. So to evaluate it is, am I coming into danger? Am I being eaten by this cultural lion of anger when I listen to populist language and it's changing my whole attitude, and it's like, we must do something. I will seek justice. That kind of a feeling. Check where the source of the anger is coming from. Many times we don't even know what we're mad about. And we're just feeling this like anger, like something's not there. Somebody's stealing from us. Number 2, do the angry words call for forceful actions? Do the angry words that you're hearing, because watch, angry words fuel angry violence. The next step from angry words and populist language is violence. And that's how cultures disintegrate and decay as well. And the more violence that takes place, then the more violence has to come to take place to try to keep the rule of law, doesn't it? And so in this case, when you're confronting your culture, you need to ask, what are they saying? If they're yelling regularly, you've got to do something, but nobody knows what it is that you're going to do. If you can't even define it, but you have to do something where it's like, I've got to take action, that leaves it for anybody who's just mad enough to go take action. And in the States, at least, what's happening where people say, I'm going to take action? They're using a lot of guns to do it. Okay? I'm not talking about gun rights here. I'm just talking about the force. We see that because it's multiple times more than anything that we're experiencing in Italia. Okay? There's other rage issues happening in Italy. Number 3, is the anger that you're experiencing or facing, is it rational or is it irrational? What do I mean by that? Rational anger is anger that aligns with God's kingdom, that gets angry or frustrated over things that are defaming the name of God, or that are hurting brothers and sisters, or injustices of sin that's taking place that's ruining and wrecking, if you will, our people. Think of it this way. Remember, the only time when Jesus showed anger personally was when he was cleansing the temple and overturning the tables. And why was he doing it? Because people couldn't pray and people couldn't commune with the Heavenly Father, and they had turned it into an idol of money and mammon there in the temple. So Jesus shows righteous, perfect anger by cleansing the house of God. That's rational anger. But most of our anger is, everybody, irrational. Come on, right? And so we explode and we become volcanic, and our culture helps us to do that. And if you have to look at it, you say, wait a minute, is it just me trying to take something? Then I'm acting like Antiochus or maybe one of those high priests. Number 4, is the anger producing in your life, what's coming out? Is it producing criticism and cursing? A lot of anger shows up because we just start using expletives, we just start cussing a lot more. Blasphemies, things start slipping out because what are we feeding on? And so if we're critical, they said this, they are this, we're finger pointing. We just get so wrapped up in everybody else and we're pointing fingers. This criticism is just thriving. It's eating us away like a cancer. And also where we're just cussing, guys, that's a sign that you've been eaten by the rage culture, your own culture. And that means you won't have a mission, a glorious grace mission to it because of what's being produced in your own heart. And then number 5, does the anger lead you to intercession or instigation? Daniel, when he saw this vision, the whole chapter 9 is his prayer of intercession. It led him to say, I need the heartbeat of God. Think of it this way. If you see an injustice, if you see something going on that, yes, it does it mean we can never be angry? No. But that our anger is righteous anger, that it's right, that it's submitted to God and his righteous wrath. What do I mean by this? I mean, when we see something going wrong, we must turn to the Lord and do what? We have to get in and pray, God, I need your heartbeat beating in my heart. Not my fury, not my anger on myself. Not taking it. God, I want to see your will, your kingdom come, and your will be done on this earth. You're the gracious King over everything. Okay? Everybody with me so far on that? Because if it's more like it's instigating me just to go do something, well then that probably means I'm not listening to the will of God or the Holy Spirit working in my life. So here is an aspect of good news in the gospel. All of the righteous anger of God, the just anger of God, fell on Jesus. Okay? That means when Jesus looks at you, when God looks at you, and he sees what? He sees the righteousness of Jesus covering you. And when he sees that, he won't be angry with you anymore. Why? Because he's pleased with his son. The Apostle Paul says that we no longer have condemnation or the wrath of God on us. We have peace with God. So my identity in Christ is I have peace with God. Because if I don't have that identity, if I don't walk and say, wow, God is not angry with me anymore, it fell on Jesus and I have his credit. If I don't have that, then I will be left to only be consumed by rage culture, and I'll just be angrier and angrier as a person and bitter all the way to the time I die. I'll just become a really ugly, angry, bitter person, full of vengeance, full of hatred. But when I know that I have peace with God, because the wrath of God, which was right to do, fell all on Jesus, it should have fallen on me, but it went on him. Now I have that. Then, friends, I can walk in this world saying, I don't have to be angry. I don't have to experience rage culture because I have peace culture. All right? I am in Christ. I am one with Shalom. And the gospel then tells us we have been given this peace of Christ that we might live it and show it so that others will be provoked to ask, why do you have this? Now, James says this. Let's just say, how do you defeat this lion? This is how we do it. Know this, my beloved brothers. Let every person be quick to what? Quick to hear. As all of our mothers said, 2 ears, 1 mouth. Use your ears more. Number 2, be slow to speak and slow to anger. Why? For the anger of man, rage culture, man's culture of anger, will never produce the righteousness of God. It will never show that there is a king of peace who reigns over us and that God's reign is good and God's reign is gracious. It will never do that unless we recognize that we are in that kingdom and we stop getting so angry about things that are only in the here and now. Does that make sense? The righteousness of God is being more like Jesus and living the gospel. Let's close. Father, thank you for the word. It's intense. It brings out themes of things that lead to violence, of things that if we continue to ignore you, if we continue to give away proper worship, Lord, that it can just lead us down a path where we're really actually desecrating your word, where we become people who are just consumed by our culture around us. So God, I pray, please forgive us of our irrational anger and of our approach to you, maybe an indifferent approach toward worship. Lord, please stir our hearts to walk wisely, to understand that you're in control, that all of the righteousness of God was given to us through Jesus, where all the wrath of God was poured out. And help us to worship you in that way. Lord, for those who might be in danger of being consumed by anger in this way, in this lion, as we went through those questions and looking in the past, Lord, I pray that they will see that you are working in grace behind the scenes and that you are sovereign, you're good, that they will receive your providence, your salvation. I pray, Lord, that we'll turn our hearts to you in tenderness and also trust. So often we get angry, Lord, because we don't trust you. And we think we have to do something because you're not doing it and you're not sufficient. God, we confess that. And so, Lord, I pray, speak these words into us, even from an ancient prophecy in Daniel. It's still your word and it's alive today. In Jesus' precious name.